Hello and welcome to Casting Views. On this week's episode, me and Dan
Hello.
have turned into tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorists. So, what we're going to do is have a chat about some well known and some lesser known conspiracy theories, talk about how plausible they are, where they came from, and whether or not we can buy into them. So, I think I'm going to kick it off.
Well, I'm going to neither confirm or deny the conspiracy that we had to restart this because I've ballsed up my audio settings. Okay,
Maybe we can play that clip as a little bonus.
maybe the swearing outtakes.
Yeah. Right, okay. Conspiracy theories. A bit more commonplace, I think, with like the rise of the internet. I feel like conspiracy theories are really easy to get into. You click on one YouTube video or one web page, and all of a sudden you go down a rabbit hole.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm really worried about my browsing history.
yeah, I feel like I'm being spoiled
Generally,
already.
anyway. Generally, anyway. But
Well, you know what? I think the first one that I'm going to kick off with is the one that I'm most worried about being watched for looking at. So, the one that I'm starting with is MK Ultra. Now, do you know what MK Ultra is, or do you know anything about MK Ultra?
no, when you're saying that, no, I'll be honest, not heard of that. But I would imagine they're the Milton Keynes football team fans. That's what I think.
Well, you know what? I feel like you've got a really good like brand, like identity there for them, but it's not, unfortunately, as much as I'd love to be talking about a conspiracy to do with MK Dons. But basically, Project MK Ultra was the code name given to what was experiments on humans that were undertaken by the CIA, and some of the experiments were basically illegal. Now, it was essentially to do with experimenting with the use of like psychedelic drugs and all kinds of chemicals
Okay.
to basically weaken people's minds, to essentially force confessions, like essentially brainwash people, and basically commit psychological torture. Basically,
Wow.
it was a project I think that started in the 50s, and then was eventually shut down in the 70s. So it went on for about 20 years, and this is obviously something that's been sanctioned by an American government body in the
Yeah,
CIA.
yeah, yeah.
So what they did is they used loads of different methods in terms of testing on people that didn't even know they were being tested on. So they used the administration of high doses of psychoactive drugs, electroshocks, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, verbal and sexual abuse, and basically lots of other forms of torture, essentially. They carried out activities at more than 80 institutions, and they included universities and hospitals, as well as prisons and pharmaceutical companies. The CIA, when they were operating the program, actually used fake front companies to basically hide the operations. So they were going into universities, and they were setting up companies that would work with pharmaceutical companies under the guise of doing something different, but in actual fact they were committing these horrific experiments. There was, I think, in the 1970s, it was following, do you know the Watergate scandal?
Yes, yeah,
So,
yeah,
following
yeah.
the Watergate scandal, the head of the CIA at the time was basically really fearful that loads of these documents would come out and be leaked through like Freedom of Information Act and that sort of thing. So, he ordered for them to all be destroyed. Now, there was a leak of 20,000 documents that were actually stored at the wrong facility, which ended up surviving the destruction order. And they were basically put in front of like the Supreme Court and that sort of thing, as to what had actually gone on. Basically, yeah, the aim was about brainwashing, and the applications as to how you could brainwash people. And it was basically mind control. Can you control the mind of a person?
And you said these are documented happenings.
This is absolutely 100% legitimate government documents. So the government documents that were found, because they were held in an account, the reason that they escaped destruction was basically because they were held in an accounting like office or something like that, because it was to do with the funding of the project. So they weren't kept with the actual research files, if that makes sense. They were separated because one of them were financial records. But in that case, some of the financial records went into the details of the spending, and as a result, what happened essentially. Now, there's a couple of things. There was a list essentially that was published from a document which talks about what the intention of the project was. So it refers to the study of an assortment of mind-altering substances described as follows: substances which promote illogical thinking and impulsiveness, materials which prevent or counteract the intoxicating effect of alcohol, and it goes on. I think it's a 17-point list about all of the different types of chemicals that they essentially wanted to use to test on people. One of their most popular drugs to use was LSD. and LSD was essentially administered illegally to people that didn't know that they were being administered it. So in the 50s, the experiments included administering LSD to mental patients, prisoners, drug addicts, and sex workers, essentially people who wouldn't fight back. And that was actually a
Yeah,
quote
yeah, yeah.
from an agency officer from the CIA who was actually involved in the project.
Wow.
In one case, again documented, they administered LSD to a mental patient in Kentucky for 174 days straight. And
Bloody
then,
hell.
as well as that, they also administered it to CIA employees, military personnel, doctors, government agents, and also members of the general public. They were obviously often administered without subjects' knowledge, basically. So the people that were being put on LSD essentially had no idea that they were doing it.
Yeah.
One really, really super dodgy and kind of filthy element to this as well is now there was a particular operation that Project MK Ultra was involved in. It was called Operation Midnight Climax. Now you'll probably understand the reason for the name when I go into a bit more detail, but the CIA
God.
set up brothels within agency safe houses to basically get a selection of men who would be too embarrassed to talk about the events that happened in the brothel.
Right.
So they were essentially dosed with LSD, and the brothels were equipped with one-way mirrors, and they were literally filmed for study later on. And obviously, because the men were going into brothels, they weren't the type of people that were going to be openly willing to talk about where they'd been drugged
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and what had happened, essentially. But yeah, that was a really kind of dirty project, essentially, that they were involved in. But again, in terms of LSD, they used it for interrogations. They used it for yeah to get people to essentially do things that they really didn't want to do, basically.
So it is quite shocking what you're saying, but also, yeah, you can believe it. And no, what I was going to say is that the 70s, while it is a long time ago, actually doesn't feel that long time ago if we're looking at it as a kind of brief line of
Yeah, I
history.
mean it's 30 years after the war. So I mean, when you
Yeah,
think
yeah.
about it, it's really not a long time ago. I mean, people that were involved in these projects are still alive now, and I think that's a concerning thing. Obviously, is the fact that it's really not that long ago, and had it not been for leaked documents and that sort of thing, nobody would know it had ever happened.
So have you seen, is there much in terms of it now, in terms of either being denied or being discussed, or is it just one of these things that now is the book is closed and it's going to be left in a dim and murky past?
Ah, right. Well, this is where it leads on to. So
Oh,
the
okay.
conspiracy theory is that ultimately MK Ultra is a project that still operates now and is controlling some of the most powerful and famous celebrities in the world.
Okay.
So
Okay.
what it does is it's controlling some of the most powerful and superstar celebrities essentially to keep populations controlled. Because if you have your puppets, because you can
Yeah,
use
yeah,
mind
yeah.
control on them to do what you want them to do, you can basically control the masses, you can control the youth and that sort of thing. And I've got some examples of some
And
people.
sorry, is this by the drug still,
Yeah, yeah. So
as
this
in the
is all to do with
celebrities
the
are being
techniques that were
controlled by the drug?
developed as a
Right,
result
right, right.
of all of the experimentation. So it's not strictly just on the LSD principle, it's also on the principle that the CIA had also developed other forms of basically controlling people's minds.
So that was like the prototype, the test stage,
Yeah,
and we're now putting it
yeah,
into effect. And
yeah.
and I know that those agencies are big subscribers of us. So hi there, by the way,
I see
the
there.
FBI.
Cannot confirm or deny that I went on your website to find this.
Yeah, yeah, I know they listen to us every week. So yeah,
But yeah, so there's a couple of famous people that are suspected of being essentially like CIA puppets.
allegedly,
Allegedly, sorry,
yeah.
we must say allegedly. We must say allegedly. Sorry. Now, one that probably hits quite close, and I know that you were obviously probably a fan given the period of time that you grew up. One was Kurt Cobain.
Oh no, don't say
I
that.
know.
Oh, not
And
Kurt.
apparently, the particular rumor is basically that he was essentially like controlled by Project MK Ultra and the people at the top. And the genius and the amazing principle behind the plan is that obviously Kurt Cobain was like what was the head of like alternative youth like counterculture basically.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
the
It
whole
was massive
principle of
back then.
that is the fact that if they can control him, he becomes what is a puppet of people that might want to be against the system, if that makes sense.
Oh no, well that'd be a shame if that's true. I absolutely yeah loved Nirvana and Kurt Cobain, and the thing is, if you look at it, what you're saying, if you look at it in isolation, yes, yeah, he was. or Nirvana did kind of break out, and it was that voice of a particular population and generation, if you know what I mean. So yeah, yeah. If you look at it, even the Beatles, remember you see the images in Elvis, all the screaming sort of girls and the teenagers. It feels like there is some control going on there.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. I mean, there's a list of loads of other celebrities that are all suspected. I mean, Beyonce falls into the list. I mean, even Taylor Swift is there as being suspected. Cardi B, do you know who Cardi B is?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
sorry, I'm not to say anything about your
How
age.
old do you think
I
I
wasn't
am?
doubting that you knew who Cardi B was then. Just thought, Kurt Cobain generation, maybe Cardi B in your scene.
The alien overlords told me who she is. It's fine.
Yeah, and I guess a lot of the principle that falls into them is that there's been like videos of, for example, Cardi B really glazed over on stage and then kind of just snapping out of it, and it's almost like a glitch in the mind control, like failing for a brief moment. And so I
Right,
think the
okay.
one behind Kurt Cobain is that all of a sudden he quickly snapped out of it, and the reason for his death is the fact that he didn't want to be a puppet, basically. So yeah, I mean, there was also a previous testimony from a doctor who had worked alongside the project, and he talked about being able to control goats moving forward. This sounds absolutely mad. Being able to control goats by telling them to go backwards and forwards, but by using a microchip implanted in their head.
So radio controlled
Radio
goats.
controlled goats, yeah, basically is what we're saying, which
But
would
with
be
your mind,
really cool.
but with
I mean, if they can do it, I think that should be on the Christmas list, to be honest. But
yeah, geez. So they had a chip in their brains, but they were being controlled by mind control.
no, so sorry. It was the principle was to find ways to control the mind. So obviously, they've probably gone from
Oh,
drugs to
okay.
then microchips and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
computers. That's kind of how it imagines to me. Now there are some actually documented subjects. Although the documented subjects that are available, from what I can find, are all people that volunteered for experiments, because obviously these were being carried out in universities, they were being carried out in all types of you know institutions, and so as a result, you could essentially volunteer for them. But ultimately, the people that volunteered didn't really know what they were volunteering for at that point still. So there was an American poet who took LSD in an experiment on Stanford University's campus. Now, Stanford University is a big name in the States. I mean, they're obviously famous for the Zimbardo prison experiment, but he had basically said that he developed paranoia, basically lasted all the way through the mid 60s for him. So it was like a 10-year period where he just felt paranoid because he'd been taking so much LSD. There was the author of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which is probably an explanation as to why he's written that book. And he, again, volunteered for MK Ultra experiments involving LSD and other psychedelic drugs when he was a student at Stanford. And he basically, yeah, went on to talk about his experiences in the book.
But at what point, I guess, does it become just people taking drugs?
Well, yeah, this is the thing. I
You
mean,
know what I mean?
I think is it plausible that people did it under the guise of, I mean, there is actually, I don't think there's anything, not that I've seen, there's no evidence that they were paid or anything for this. I think it was literally just studies that were done at institutions. It's a bit like when you're at uni, people say, "Oh, do you want to come be part of this? I need 50 people to be part of this survey type thing," except
Yeah,
they
yeah.
offer you LSD instead. So I think that that's really just what it was. It's students that turned around and just agreed to be part of experiments for the sake of it, I guess. But there's other ones. So do you know who James Whitey Bulger was?
Yes,
Mobster.
yeah. The name rings a bell.
I mean, I think he died
Yes, yes,
in
yes,
prison. I
yes,
think
yes.
he was killed in prison, literally maybe 2 or 3 years ago. But he alleged that he'd been injected with LSD while he was in prison in the 50s. And he said that he was weekly injected with LSD while he was in prison.
Right.
But obviously, the value of his testimony when he's like a mobster who's ratted on people to get in there in the first place. Don't know whether or not he's the perfect example. But yeah, so essentially the conspiracy theory is that MK Ultra was such a successful project that it's not actually closed. It in fact continued, and the closure of the project was all a facade, basically, to continue it.
So yeah, so it was to put to bed the testing, like I said, the test phase, and we're now into the applying it.
So now all of our big celebrities, your Taylor Swifts, your Johnny Depps, your other mainstream celebrities are available. All of your big
Yeah,
celebrities
yeah.
are now government agents, basically.
Well, this is interesting. That the whole thing about being controlled. That at what point? Because soon we've already had testing a lot of like sort of chips under the skin to do payments and entry into like the security doors and things like that. And at what point does science then sort of go down the route of, well, we could take the stress off your brain or off certain organs by putting this chip in your body that's going to make that
Yeah, it's
happen.
true.
It's an odd one. So yeah, that's it's quite a big one to start off
Yeah,
with to kick this
it's
pod
a
off
it's a
with.
big one.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
you've gone right in there, haven't you?
if
I mean, government agencies,
I
celebrities.
mean,
I
if
mean, if we're not here next week, everyone, please do try email us. Do reach out to us, please.
yeah, if we're not on the radar of world governments and secret organisations now, we certainly are. Or if we weren't, we certainly are now.
You only just came off it last week as well, was it?
That's my big one. And again, I was a bit conscious of discussing this in the fear that my computer internet history would be compromised. But I think as well it linked in at the time. The Americans were like in the middle of the Cold War with the Russians, and basically I think it probably originally started as a way of coercing spies and that sort of thing. But ultimately, when you're doing that sort of thing, who do you test on? I guess is the principle. And so they kind of had to expand it. But obviously, with this conspiracy theory, with the knowledge in the fact that the CIA consciously did test on people that didn't consent and had no idea what they were getting themselves into, is it plausible that this sort of thing still happens? I think, yeah, I think it's plausible.
Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, in terms of potential torture, even though it doesn't officially take place, and there will be experimentation. I mean,
Yeah, this is the thing. And I mean, ultimately as well, like research that's been particularly immoral has been like a theme. I mean, do you know with the Japanese scientists, I think they had like a during World War II, the Japanese did really horrific experiments on soldiers and prisoners of war that didn't consent, like to do with hypothermia. Like they'd give people
yeah,
hypothermia and that sort of thing. It was really abhorrent research. But after the war, the Americans actually still use that today because it's the most in-depth research that you can get. Because obviously, it's completely unethical to do that sort of research now.
yeah.
That you learnt so much from when it was done. Essentially, that's why you still use that research. So again, I can probably understand why it would happen because ultimately you need people to experiment on, and I don't think that coming forward and telling people that you want to try and control their minds with drugs is
Yeah, well,
is a
yeah,
way that you're going to
yeah.
get people to just sign their name on the consent form. So yeah, I think it's perfectly plausible. Do I think that the whole celebrity control thing? Probably not. I'm a bit more shy on that whole conspiracy theory, but then again, who's to say that it's not happening?
I'm just going to go on record and say I absolutely disagree with everything that's just been said in the last 19 minutes. Okay, I'm just having it on record. I absolutely categorically don't believe it happened, and I'm not nodding to you. Right. Okay. Cool. Should we move on?
Yeah, go on then. Let's give me one of yours.
So I am not going to involve, well, actually, I'll say it, but I'm not going to involve government agencies, but it does involve potentially aliens and Nazis.
Right.
Now, now, I did actually have a look, and I think if we've got time, I think later we should look at why conspiracy theories are great because we're going to pick a couple, but there's hundreds. Because I think I'm cheating with my second one, but Wikipedia describes it: a conspiracy theory as an explanation for an event or situation that invokes a conspiracy by sinister and powerful groups, often political in motivation, when other explanations are more probable. So I think your one absolutely fits that. My first one I think does as well. So I am going to lead with hollow Earth theory. Is that one you've heard of?
I've heard of Hollow Earth theory, but I would be lying if I said that I knew much about it.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not there. There is a fair bit out there. I'm not going to go massively into it. It's just one I just want to bring up because it's a fun one, and I didn't know about this until a few years ago. I was listening to a late night radio show, and a couple of people called up talking about this. Now, I've always heard of the flat Earth, and it was amazing, kind of the research, how many different Earth theories there are. So I want to put all of these people in a room and let them fight it out and
See
see who
which one
wins.
comes out
Um,
victorious. Like, yes, your theory's
yeah,
correct. The Earth is flat.
yeah. So it's kind of the opposite of the flat Earth. It's that the hollow Earth is a concept that says the Earth is entirely hollow, or it's got a a large interior space. So it's not to say that we haven't got layers and layers of magma, rock, earth, etc. But ultimately, at the core of the Earth, there is a massive space that exists. We are totally hollow. Now, the reason I say about Nazis and aliens is because yes, some people, the conspiracies are that it's a place where aliens are living, and they're taking their time before they come out and either show themselves or invade. There's another theory I saw that believes that German soldiers, following the end of the war, have hidden in there and are planning their next attack, or are planning planning what they do next. So I kind of found this really interesting, again, just because of the fact that it goes against so many other things. Now, as in like flat Earth theory. Now, I think when I was researching this, I found reference to this as early as the 1500s. Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream. So that was 1595. He says like he just pulled that out of the back of his head and not written down on a bit of paper. But it was Midsummer Night's Dream, where the idea may have already been known there, and it's there's a line that says, I'll believe as soon this whole earth may be bored, and that the moon may through the centre creep, and so displease her brother's noontide with antipodes. And I'm available for any play if there are any directors listening. So this goes back 500 odd years, or over 400 years, and it looks like it's been a consistent theory throughout time. Now, I can imagine back then, when maybe science isn't as developed as it is now, that people think that. But when I then started looking at it, I kind of understand where some of this comes from. It seems to be a lot, or in a lot of religions, and I think it kind of stems from potentially the thought of maybe an afterlife, or somewhere where spirits go.
Right, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, because it apparently it appears in mythology, folklore, and legends. In the Greek underworld, in Nordic, the Christian hell. What have we got? According to ancient Greek, there was caverns under the surface that were entrances leading to the underworld. In Celtic mythology, there is a legend of a cave, which I won't attempt to pronounce, but known as Island's Gate to Hell. It's a mythical and ancient cave from which, according to legend, strange creatures would emerge and be seen on the surface of the earth. There are also stories of medieval knights and saints who went on pilgrimages to a cave located in Ireland, where they made journeys into the earth in a place of purgatory. And again, other religions, we've got, I think I mentioned Buddhism, Hindu, multiple Middle Ages European sort of history tales, stories. So I kind of maybe see how that theory has come about because of that. So, we used to bury, or we still do, we bury people, they go into the ground. And is there a thought that that's maybe where souls or the demons live?
Well, I guess as well, whenever people talk about like the afterlife, what happens, they're like, oh, do you go up or do you go down? And you always look below because you're like, well, hell is definitely down because that's where it is, because the earth is hot, like the middle of the earth is like all fire and
Yeah,
brimstone. So I guess, yeah, I can understand where it comes from. I guess, though, the modern day conspiracy theorists have kind of taken it and then added the whole alien Hitler thing.
exactly. And I think that's where, probably if I look long enough, probably Elvis is living in there as well. But yeah, that's the bit where I find fascinating now, is that it's obviously it's got that root in folklore and the afterlife, and again, I get that, and it's fairly consistent between, along the different civilizations and times. But yeah, we've now got, aliens and sort of soldiers living in there. I think it can depend, but the theory is the holes to enter and exit are at each pole, so the North Pole and the South
Okay,
Pole.
okay, logical, I guess, somehow.
It feels quite easy, that, doesn't it? So it's at the North Pole, North and South Pole. So, and a couple of other theories and people that have discussed it in the past was, there was in 1664, and I don't remember who claimed this, but what this person believed, that the Earth contained a central fire, and what he was saying, vast underground lakes and lava chambers, and at the North Pole there's a vortex that sucks the water in, where it's then heated and it's spelled out the South Pole. So what this person thought, rather than it being like a hiding place, that's what happens. So to cool this center of the Earth down, water would come in through the North Pole, out the other end as a gaseous form.
Right, okay.
I kind of really like that idea. Then in 1692, we got Halley, Edmund Halley, so he of Halley's Comet. He put forward the idea that the Earth consists of a hollow shell, and two inner concentric shells, which I think then have their own magnetic poles, and they rotate at different speeds, which then would also explain anomalous compass readings. So again, it's kind of, whilst this isn't as heavy or as what's the word, sinister as the one you mentioned, I kind of love this idea because so many people have had their own thoughts, and I think a couple of other things I've mentioned, that it's linked to kind of folklore. Other theories believe that there's a civilization in and of itself living in there, whether that's humans or something else. But the one fact that I liked, that I read, and I believe this still to be the case, but they said the deepest hole drilled in Earth today with a true vertical drill depth. So there's a hole that goes for longer, but not straight down. If you know
Okay.
what I mean? Is 7.5 miles,
Yeah.
which doesn't sound a lot, but I guess it's
That's one
quite
long drill bit, though.
yeah, exactly. But the distance to the center of the Earth is nearly 4,000
Yeah, I
miles.
guess, I mean, there's probably a limit to what we can actually know for certain anyway. Imagine with that theory that you were talking about with Nazis, all of a sudden you dig 15 miles and all of a sudden it cracks open and you just hear Scheiße. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
no!
Well,
They're like, they have found us.
but this is the thing now. I'm not saying there are people
Yeah, no,
living in
no,
the
no,
center
no,
of our
no,
Earth.
yeah.
But I kind of like the idea of the water going in through the top and coming out the bottom, almost like a central heating system.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a lot of things in the world that all kind of work similarly, like, trees breathing systems and that sort of thing. So maybe the Earth is just like one big human body, and that's how it's like a bit like it's digestive, breathing type thing. Yeah, I can kind of get on board with it. I guess it's probably helped. This theory's probably helped by the fact that like there is actually just a physical limit to how far we can dig. You can't exactly do that thing that you do with like a watermelon at the supermarket, go tap tap and be like, nah, it's
Yeah,
hollow. It's
yeah, yeah.
you, it's
Actually, that's a conspiracy. I don't believe that's true. All these people tapping melons. I want to test them. And 10 out of 10 melons they do that with, how many are actually good? Uh, but yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something I want to come on to later. Why do people love a conspiracy theory? A couple of other things about this is that someone else believes that it's an area it's just got exotic and extinct animals in there, that there's a super advanced civilization in there, that the people
it's just woolly mammoths in the center of the earth and saber-toothed
yeah,
tigers.
they
It's
didn't
like
go
the whole
extinct,
cast of Ice Age is down there.
just fell down the hole. Yeah, the squirrel caused that hole, and everyone, yeah, and the woolly mammoth fell in. That the inhabitants in there are super advanced or have achieved some form of utopia, which, I believe they'd want to keep that to themselves if they
That's
have.
probably true. Yeah.
Yeah, and others say that the internal world has been colonized by missing explorers. And one of the key thing in most of the theories is that this inner world or worlds are always superior to ours.
Right. Right.
So it's advanced, superior beings and an environment to us.
Okay, so I guess it's kind of like, Lost City of Atlantis, they were way more advanced than we were, and so as a result, that's the kind of if there is a civilization there, that's the kind of one that's living there, basically.
And I like this one. Like I said, I like this one because you can laugh off and you can laugh off, if you want, the flat Earth theory. But the hollow Earth. Whilst I'm not saying the Earth is hollow, again, people can look at it, and we've not gone to the center of the Earth. We've not done it. So I think that's why things like this can prosper. Again, not that there's an alien ET's not in there. I don't think that. But I just love the fact that for almost 500 years this has been a thing.
You know what? I agree with you to an extent with what you just said. However, the only counter the counter that I would have to that is that this theory will always exist. Even if we get to the center of the earth, it will always exist. And that's because you can get on a plane and you can go and see the curvature of the earth, but flat earthers still exist. So this is the problem. I feel like perspective, you could have the biggest drill bit in the world and all of a sudden the earth would still be flat because it's a cover up or something like that. So I feel like it would always have a little bit of weight. However, with what we know at the minute, maybe in 1,000 years' time when someone listens to this, they can be like, haha, they thought they didn't know that the earth was hollow. Maybe in 1,000 years'
If anyone
time.
is if anyone is sailing by either of the poles, let us know if you see a hole or a
If you
vortex.
see any water just randomly shooting out of the center of the earth.
But just before we move on, a couple of other things that came out of this was, I saw also that there is a hollow moon theory. Everything's hollow now, apparently. And whilst I didn't really look into it, it's just that there's thoughts that things that the astronauts have left on the moon have shown that there's massive vibrations that go through the moon. Between 1969 and 77, seismometers installed on the moon by the Apollo missions recorded moonquakes.
Okay.
The moon was described as ringing like a bell during some of those quakes. Again, I'm not entirely sure what conspiracy this is trying to cover up, because I just saw it and I just wrote it down because this wasn't the one I wanted to focus on. Again, it's just, and we'll probably come back to it later, it's just we've got to find, a lot of people seem to not want to believe anything
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
or take things at face value, which is good, The last thing on this point, and again, something I hadn't heard of either until I'd done this, but there's also the inside out Earth theory. And what this details is, and if I've understood this right, imagine the Earth as a circle, or as a sphere like we are now. We are on the inside of the universe, and so as you go into the center, if you look at the sky and the universe, that's actually all contained within a big sphere. So the
Okay.
Earth actually is around it, and the universe goes up. So it's let's have a look. I think I've got it here. Yeah. So there was a physician, an alchemist turned religious leader and self-proclaimed Messiah.
He's the most reliable of sources.
He came up, and I think this was in the 19th century, but he said the universe occupies a hollow cell in solid rock, 8,000 miles 8,000 miles in diameter. We live and walk on a spherical inner surface of this cell, our heads pointing toward its center. The entire universe that we see in the sky lies within this cell, cradled in the hands of God. Again, I could probably understand that theory. So again, I'm not saying that this is necessarily a new thing, but I'm sure there are people that still think this. But I kind of like the notion of we are walking on the inside of a universe rather than being within it. Do you know what I mean?
I'd probably be more inclined to get on board with that one because I think it'd be a cooler prospect.
Yeah, and again, it kind of again is totally contrary to the flat Earth thing. So we've got so many, just on our one planet, we've got so many different theories, and like I said, I'm not saying any one of them is true, any one set of people are wrong. I just think it's fantastic that this planet we've been living on for all these years, there's still so many different beliefs about it. But
Like I said, do you reckon? Yeah, do you reckon in 1,000 years' time there'll be like conspiracy theorists about the Earth, but they'll just be even more ridiculous because we'll just have 1,000 years worth of more knowledge. So like we'll know exactly what's at the center of the Earth when all of the Nazis come out and execute their master plan. But the theorists will still be like, no, 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 we're actually on a planet made of marshmallow and we're in the middle of a
oh,
computer
marshmallow.
simulation.
They're in danger with me if it's marshmallow. I'll have eaten half of it. But well, I think it would probably be more conspiracy theories as maybe we get more and more understanding of the universe. We'll probably start coming up with more theories about the rest of the universe.
Yeah,
Maybe
that's probably true. More about other planets and that sort of thing, maybe.
yeah.
Do you know what I was gonna say though?
Neptune's just a satellite dish or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Maybe it's just like people in 1,000 years' time are just like, yeah. Did you know that Neptune was put there by the governments of 1,000 years ago? Like they were way more advanced than they thought.
Sorry, you were going to say
I was
something,
going to
weren't you?
say on the thing of obviously the American government now that we've already gone there as well. You made the point about the hollow moon theory, didn't you?
You went
I,
there.
I
You
went there.
went there.
Sorry, I and I alone went there,
Yeah,
and I'm about to
yeah,
go there again.
yeah.
You also made the theory about the hollow moon theory. One thing I would say to that is how would we know whether or not the moon was hollow when we've never been there?
Here we go. That was it.
That's it. No government confirmed.
That's not your second.
No, no, it's not my second one, but I'm definitely on the government hit list.
We didn't necessarily, so we knew this is what we were going to talk about, but we didn't talk about what we were going to do. And I think it's quite good that we didn't pick a couple of the obvious ones or big ones like the moon landing. And
Yeah, yeah. 'Cause do you know what it is as well? They're just so heavily done. It's a bit like JFK's assassination is another big one. Like I saw a couple about like Princess Diana. Not that that's really particularly morbid in any case, anyway. But stuff like moon landings, that sort of thing, I was just like, no, we'll stay away from that because you can go and watch 100 documentaries on the History Channel.
that's what I think is great about this. There are, or there are so many out there that we didn't pick either the same ones or we didn't pick the big ones. Actually, something I just remembered as well, because I've just had a look down my notes. Along with the moon, there's also someone who is also a flat earther says that the moon isn't real and that it's a projection.
Onto the world's biggest onto the universe's biggest green screen, I would imagine.
Yeah. Now, again, he said he's used sort of theories and equations to work that out. But again, my thing on this is, other than because we've said we've landed on it, what possible thing for saying that the moon isn't real? What would the reason be? Why would we put a projection of the moon up? I mean, also we've kind of proved things like the effect it has on the oceans and stuff like that. And this is recent because this was in an interview with the Guardian. I haven't got the time on that. And along with that, some people are saying that it is a hoax because it was used to create the general masses from the existence of a planet called, I think it's Nibiru, that's going to cause the apocalypse. That's probably a good reason to put a projection of the moon to
Yeah,
say,
yeah,
to
yeah.
distract.
That's true as well. I feel like we're getting into like War of the Worlds territory now, and that film scares the living shit out of me. So,
But yes, so my pick number one, if you like it, Hollow Earth theory.
I,
So
I can
yeah,
get on board with a fair amount of that. Like I said, I mean, in terms of obviously just what we know as people about the Earth, I guess like from it's a matter of fact that you just can't dig that far down. So I mean, in and of itself, technically, there's got to be some form of a little bit of truth to it. And it's
it's
true
not
what you say.
totally false.
Yeah, yeah, and it's true what you say. Like religions have always had like a linking theme of like the underworld. There's definitely something under. Do you know what I mean? It's always been, even in mythology thousands of years ago, it's been a constant running theme. And like I said, nowadays you go hell and you look at your shoes, don't you? Because that's just where you assume it is.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
in reality probably makes no sense. I wonder if I will get to the afterlife. I'll be like, oh shit, where did I go?
Right, what's your number two, for
Well,
want of a better phrase?
do you know what the thing is as well? I feel like me and you are going to start to develop a really running theme because I feel like I go dark and you go a bit more light.
Well, actually, again, I won't say it. Mine, it probably will be a light discussion, but what it actually is the complete opposite end of dark. But we'll come to that. We'll come. Sorry, is the complete opposite of light. But we'll come to that. We'll come to that.
Well, I mean, it is dark, obviously, because lots of people died, but obviously the reasons for it again are what's to be discussed. So mine's to do with the Titanic, my second one,
Okay.
and the fact
Okay.
that it
Yep.
wasn't actually the Titanic, the ship Titanic, that sank. It was a different ship.
Okay.
So the theory goes, and the kind of the reason for the theory developing in the first instance is White Star Line, who obviously were the owners of the Titanic and a number of other ships, had built three ships, I think, that all looked relatively similar. So they built the Titanic, and the other ship that we're going to be discussing is called the Olympic. Now,
Hmm.
in September of 1911, the Olympic collided with a ship off the coast of the Isle of Wight. Now, it caused a load of problems for White Star Line because it had to be taken out of service while they repaired it, but it also meant that the voyage of the Titanic had to be put back. So it was pushed back from the 20th of March to the 10th of April. Now, at the time, White Star Line, obviously, with the with the bills of building the Titanic, basically had too many outgoings and they had too many bills to pay. So the fact that they now needed to repair their other flagship ship, um,
Yeah.
they basically would put them in horrific financial trouble. So the theory goes that the plan was to switch the Olympic with the Titanic and to sink it to claim the compensation money.
Okay. An insurance job.
Yeah, basically, yeah, an insurance job. So the people, the big players, J.P. Morgan was one of the people involved, supposedly. Basically, if you looked at the two ships, and you can get photographs of them up if you wanted. If you looked at the two ships next to each other, you at first glance, you really would have no idea that they were different boats. To be honest with you, they were pretty much identical. Now, what's been said is the only things that were named were stuff like lifeboats, life jackets, but obviously the theory goes into the fact that they're easy things to switch out before a voyage because you just put 20 new lifeboats on a ship and you replace all the life jackets. So what they did is apparently a job was undertaken to make the Olympic look even more like the Titanic. So apparently carpets and that
Yeah,
sort
I'm
of
just
thing will have
looking
been
at it.
pulled
Sorry,
out.
I'm just I'm just looking at it. Yeah, the two ships. Yeah, yeah, yeah. They do look similar.
Yeah, see, this is the thing. So the ships look the same. So apparently they'd pulled carpets up and that sort of thing. Because obviously the Titanic had never sailed, so you couldn't have trodden down carpet because it would mean that people had been in there before. So the theory goes is that pictures taken before the maiden voyage of the Titanic show really slight differences in the way that certain windows are on the ship. On the RMS Olympic, there are windows that are very thin and they're all very unevenly spaced. There's not an equal distance between them. And there's pictures kind of side by side. There's also technically testimony from people that built the Titanic. White Star Line were accused of basically getting these employees to change the ship and do all of these modifications to it, and then they were immediately gotten rid of, essentially, as in like the employees were sacked. It was the last job they ever did, and that's because they wouldn't be involved in obviously seeing the ship then take off and all of that sort of thing. But yeah, that's really the basis for the theory, I guess.
I think I completely missed the key bit. So we're saying that it was then intentionally sunk. So the conspiracy is not just that obviously it was a different ship, but it was intentionally sunk
Yeah, also that it was sunk, yeah, for the purposes of the insurance job,
of
essentially.
the insurance. Which yeah, that then already there that puts a massive spin on, or sorry, not spin, twist on that horrific event. Anyway,
I mean, they've got people that worked. I mean, there's a guy called Paddy Fenton who was basically somebody that had worked on the ship, and there's a letter that was sent to an Australian, sorry, to an Australian bloke sent a letter to a newspaper, which is basically about a conversation that he'd had with this worker, and it's quoted the letter as saying, when the surviving crew got to port, they were all taken aside, met by two men, one in a high position in the company, and the other person was from the government, and they basically read the Official Secrets Act, explaining that if they were told the reason, if they ever exposed the reason for the sinking or rumours of an insurance scam, they would serve prison time and would never get a job when they got out. And that's apparently after the sinking. So that was people that had been on the Titanic who had sailed on it that were then taken aside by government officials. And then there's obviously other coincidences. So it was people like JP Morgan was apparently somebody who was supposed to be on the ship and he cancelled his trip at the last minute. Obviously, he was also one of the big players in terms of behind White Star Line as well. Again, apparently lots of valuables from the ship were removed just prior to it leaving Southampton, which is just an indication that they didn't want things to be lost at sea that were of any value. But yeah, I mean, it's all kind of circumstantial. It's difficult, obviously, because it's 110 years ago now, and obviously documents, testimonies died out because there is no one alive now from that ship. So it's difficult because you've got no proper testimony from anyone at this point. It's a case of, is it circumstantial enough to be convincing or not, basically.
from my perspective, the Titanic is just something in history now, in the sense of we just take it, this event happened and that's it. You know, yes, there's been a film, yes, you get certain programs, but I think I did see a one liner on it when I was looking into the whole conspiracies. But yeah, this is really the first time I'm really hearing about a potential conspiracy of this scale around, yeah, around the ship. The fact that it was an intentional event.
Yeah, I mean, as well, there's pictures of the Titanic being built, and then obviously the Titanic on its voyage. So there's a comparison of like portholes on particular sides of the ship and particular parts of the ship, not essentially correlating with the then photographs that were taken of the ship just before it left, indicating that it potentially was a different ship entirely. There's pictures, obviously, from when was it James Cameron was the one that discovered the Titanic, wasn't it? There were pictures taken from when he had his research team. Essentially, you know, they got all of those divers that went down and those robot driving boat underwater things, submarines, underwater driving boats. Got to see that in the dictionary saying. And basically, people have compared images of the shipwreck underneath the water to pictures of what the Titanic looked like when it was being built. And obviously, I guess the logic behind that is, you know, at the time, if you were in for an insurance scam, if you sink a ship back in 1911, you're never ever going to believe that anyone's finding it, are you? So to you,
Well,
it doesn't matter.
especially yeah, especially that far
Yeah,
out. I
this is what
mean,
I mean. You
like I
know,
said, we've the ocean is obviously so deep. There are bits of it we still haven't seen, right? The bottom of it. So especially sort of 100 odd years ago, good luck trying to get to it.
yeah, and I think there's also questions about paneling basically used as well during the Titanic. So where it was built, particular parts had particular serial numbers. So it's basically serial numbers on particular parts of the ship actually correlated to the part numbers that were used on the Olympic as opposed to the part numbers that were used on the Titanic. Again, potentially coincidental, I guess, because at the time would parts have been just reused? Maybe, I
It's in,
guess.
it's interesting, yeah, because I'm looking at it and they're saying kind of like what you said, that someone's saying that the damage couldn't have been caused by an iceberg, that it was a ship that was, oh, hold on, I've lost it now. But yeah, basically, where it was another boat, another vessel that did it.
Yeah, and this is the thing. I think this one's a bit of a dodgy one because obviously it's a terribly like tragic event. However, it was just too long to completely be able to dispel it. Does that make sense? It's almost too far gone for us to be able to turn around and say, well, all of the evidence points to this, because obviously pictures of the ship in and of itself just weren't as common because how many people had cameras? Do you know what I mean? If you had
Yeah,
if you had this nowadays and you had the biggest ship in the world taking sail, you'd have 100,000 images of it
yeah, yeah,
all in
yeah.
HD, and there'd be no doubts about what it looked like. Whereas back then, again, you've only got limited photos of what the Titanic looked like because of just the nature of the time.
But does that feed into, and depending on which order we release our episodes, but we discussed the weird phenomena a couple of weeks ago, and we said maybe has modern technology and the amount of people that now have even that everyone, pretty much almost everyone's got a video camera in their pocket now, right? Does that mean we can believe things in the past a lot more because, like you've just said, there isn't the evidence to disprove it?
Yeah, yeah. And this is the thing. I think that's probably where this one kind of falls. It's a case of it's a difficult one to say because you know what the official events were. Everybody's seen the film. Do you know what I mean? So that's kind of the story that you had to believe.
Don't take the film as the official
No,
event.
no, no. But do you know what I mean? Like you get the general
I know,
gist
I
of
know.
what
Yeah,
happened,
yeah, yeah,
basically.
yeah.
Um, but the only issue is obviously looking at what we've just discussed. I mean, at the beginning of the episode, we talked about the government literally experimenting on people as soon as what 50, 60 years ago. Is it perfectly plausible that a company at the time that was going to face massive losses as a result of the loss of probably its second bit like flagship ship, is it plausible that they did an insurance job? Absolutely. In reality,
Yeah, yeah.
and at the time again, you'd think about it and you'd think, well, who would ever know?
Well, well, that's it. And like I said, it's all about paperwork, right? When we're going back that far, paperwork is the one thing that can prove or disprove it, and that paperwork's not going to exist, is it? Or it's not going to be available to many people.
I mean, yeah, in reality, the only way that I think you'll ever know is if you could raise somebody that worked on the ship from the dead and have a chat with them, which you're not going to be able to do, or if you could lift that ship out of the water in pristine condition and then like go through it with like fine like tooth comb, basically. But I just don't think either of those things are plausible.
I think the thing that, as you said, what helps people to believe these things more is when you do have stories of these tragedies and it's a case of, oh, so and so should have been on that but they didn't, they ended up not being on it. I think that helps fuel conspiracy theories massively.
Yeah, that's true because I think you hear it a lot with 9/11, don't you? I mean, you hear all the time this
Yeah,
person was
yeah.
supposed to be in this tower or this person had a meeting there and it was cancelled, and I guess that's obviously again, but this is what I said before. It's all kind of circumstantial, but the issue is it circumstantial enough to warrant it being believable? Because I think you can get to a point where circumstantial evidence, to an extent, can be enough to turn around and say, you know what, you can probably get on board with that idea.
Yeah, I think what I would say is, as a proposal, I can believe it. Yeah, like you said, insurance job, switch a boat over. They look very similar. Sink it. Do I believe it's potentially true and not just a tragic event? I'm not sure I could say that because it's feels quite, even for that day. It's a massive undertaking and such a huge event.
Well, this is the thing. Also, sorry, just further to J.P. Morgan as well. J. Bruce Ismay, who was another person, essentially like one of the big dogs in terms of White Star Line. Um, he was also scheduled to be on that voyage, but apparently they all cancelled because of his wife's ill health. But the problem is, J.P. Morgan was spotted in France 2 days later, perfectly fine, and Bruce Ismay's family were spotted in Wales on a holiday, perfectly fine, literally days afterwards. So again, it's a case of, is that enough to turn around and say, well, that combined with the fact that they removed valuables, combined with the fact that you have X pictures, combined with the fact that you have really limited testimony, combined with the fact that in and of itself, it was actually just an expensive thing because they had one ship that had had an accident, would you, as a reasonable person at the time, turn around and think, how could we get out of this situation? And that would be your nearest jump. I could understand how it could come about that way. Basically, I could understand what could drive people to think that that's the decision they should make.
I think it comes down to like some of the other ones you've mentioned, some of the other big ones, that for me the central idea is plausible, but it would need a lot of people, and again, I'm not saying this discounts it or counts it, but it's one of those ones that, yeah, the idea is plausible, but it would take a lot of people in the know to keep quiet and
Yeah,
to pull
yeah,
it off.
I can
Do you
get on
see
board
what I'm
with that.
saying?
But
It's
then again, like I said, I mean, when you look at the one that I talked about previously, we knew that 80 plus universities, prisons, pharmaceutical companies all willingly hosted ethical experiments. All of the doctors and that sort of thing all knew what was going on. Professors at universities all knew what was going on, and everybody staged them. So this is the thing. I think it's a case of, if you've got workers that are working in shipyards who are making a pittance at the time, all of a sudden, as much as you might have, let's say, I don't know how many people worked on the Titanic. Let's say you've got 100 people for argument's sake. All of a sudden, they get a huge payday or payoff for people that are making next to no money in and of itself, in terms of obviously doing the job that they're doing. All of a sudden, does that buy loyalty? The answer is probably yes in that situation, because money actually does talk. You buy a man out, you buy a man out of his hardship. Do you gain his loyalty for that? The answer is probably yes. And so when you look at people like J.P. Morgan, who were the hundreds of billionaires 100 years ago, you are getting into the realms of people that physically have the capacity and the finance to do whatever they want. So that's probably where it holds weight for me.
the conspiracy of editing may cut out that last rant, but we'll see. But what I'll do is we'll move on to mine. And my final one is, and this is one where I think I've cheated a little bit because I didn't find much of it online, which actually may prove this this conspiracy. But I'm going to take it the fact that it would involve a group of scientists or potentially governments, and it is a theory that something bad has happened and we're being having the wool pulled over our eyes. But the funny thing about this, and I'm going to go over it, I'm kind of going to be all over the place for this one because again, I couldn't find much in the way of sort of a lot of structured articles on this. It's based on a Twitter thread, right, from 2 years ago, but I found it on a website. So you said that I generally stay light, and I am. But what if I told you basically the world ended 9 years ago? We just don't know it.
It'd be strange because I feel like I kind of know what's going on.
Yeah, well, this is it. So this all hinges on the fact that the Hadron Collider in CERN, where they were trying to find the
Right,
God
okay.
particle. They're basically saying that that caused a massive black hole which swallowed up the Earth, and that was then one of two things. Again, it's either that was the end of time and we just don't know it, or we've then been put into a computer simulation to keep
Right.
us going.
It's a bit Elon Musky, I think, isn't it?
Again, the reason I like this, and I said to you, there's not much in the way of anything, but this is what again attracted me to this one even more because it was someone who passionately was putting their argument forward, and I haven't looked at their recent tweets just to see if they still believe this kind of thing or not. But what they said, this all hinges on a thing that people are saying that the world hasn't felt right since 2012. I mean, it's quite subjective. And what they're saying is that we have potentially moved into a parallel universe. Now, I'm going to bring something that you and I have spoken about quite a lot, and also something that could have featured in our phenomena episode. They are also describing this event as what's caused the Mandela effect. Now, I know you know what the Mandela effect is. For people listening, if you don't know what the Mandela effect is, and I'm probably not saying it word for word, but it's my understanding. It's almost like a collective conscious thought of an event not being actually as it was. So it's not necessarily one person. There's a group of people that think an event happened one way. Now, the reason it's called Mandela effect is one of the first things that caused it was Nelson Mandela died in 2013, I believe it was. But people thought he died in the 80s in prison. And the fact that when I looked it up, the fact that he died in 2013 and the Mandela effect was born then, and they are saying that the world was swallowed up in 2012. I mean,
So
that
basically,
fits
the whole Mayan
perfect.
calendar thing was correct then.
Well, some people are actually saying that I think 2020 or 2021 is actually potentially the 2012
Right.
of the Mayan
Okay.
calendar.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, we had that film at the time,
Yeah,
2012. Did
yeah,
you see
I
that
remember that.
disaster
And you
film?
had websites which were specifically dedicated to like end of the world countdown clocks. Do you remember that like whole phenomenon?
So for most people, the Mandela effect.
They remember a brand being spelt differently. So the ones that have kept cropping up are Skechers. Some people remember it being having a TCH in it rather than how it's spelled, or Febreze. There's lots of programs and brands where they said, no, it was never called that. Another one was the Looney Tunes cartoons. People thought it was called Looney Tunes
Oh yeah,
or the
yeah,
other way
yeah. How
around.
it's
And
spelt, that sort of thing. Yeah, yeah. I think one of them, I think if I remember rightly, one's about Monopoly and whether or not the Monopoly man wears a monocle. That's another one. Yeah.
that's one I've seen. You know, Mandela effect generally tends to be around things like that, sort of subtle things like a spelling or part of an image. Now, you could say, oh, but that's just memory. People are forgetting things. It's because it's quantified by a large amount of people all having that same belief, which is, I think, what would officially qualify it as being, you know, the Mandela effect. Yeah, people thought Looney Tunes was called Looney Tunes. There's a lot of these are kind of American shows, which I don't really know, but there was a children's program called the Berenstein Bears, and that was spelt differently. Apparently, Curious George, I've got an image here where people thought he had a tail, but he never did. So it's that kind of thing. And like I said, you know, you can think of it as a memory thing, but so many people believe it.
Maybe is the Mandela effect as well. Maybe not our minds kind of building an image that fits. So, for example, with the Monopoly man, it's a bloke in a top hat. It makes sense for him to wear a monocle. So,
But
but
yeah,
then again, you wouldn't get the same
potentially,
with
and
like a couple of the examples you just said. You wouldn't logically, my brain can't go as to why people would think that way with a couple of the other examples. So I don't know.
it also would be for me, how often do I pay ultra close attention to a logo? Like I've done these logo quizzes on my phone. You know, I've had an Apple phone for years, but if I can remember which way the Apple logo faces and with the leaf,
Which
I'll probably
side the
get it wrong
chunks
nine
out of?
times out
Yeah,
of
yeah,
ten. But I'm not saying, yeah, you know, so, but that's me more about probably not paying that close attention. But then when you're looking at it, you
yeah,
know the logo, you recognize it's Apple, and then you say, "No, I
yeah,
always thought it was that side." Does it stem from that? So yeah, so this guy is saying that yeah, he thinks we live, or he believed anyway, because again, this was 2 years ago, that we lived in a series of simulations that the universe was destroyed, and our consciousness has moved into a universe next door. And like I said, I just love the way the Mandela effect came into it. But then now again, and it's on Twitter, so and on the internet, so things can be what's the word? You don't necessarily believe everything you read, or you shouldn't believe everything. But if you then go into it, and I'll send you the link at some point, there's a whole load of posts and messages where people are saying that the Statue of Liberty was on Ellis Island rather than Liberty Island. So there's like loads of screenshots of people saying, "Oh yeah, I've just come back from seeing the Statue of Liberty on Ellis Island," and people are saying that this is evidence of a residue of another
right.
timeline,
Okay, okay, I get it, I get it.
which actually links into the Mandela effect. Because yeah, why are we saying that that's wrong? Maybe it was right, but it's just a different
Because the world
timeline
that
or a
we knew it
different
has
universe we
ended,
were in.
and so we are in a different timeline now. Yeah.
You know, just like any forgery, they don't ever get
Yeah,
it
yeah,
spot
that's
on. Do you
true.
know
That's
what I
true.
mean? There was, I mean, and I looked at it on Google because I was just curious. I found a spot, and someone was saying on Google Maps the Statue of Liberty isn't on the plinth where it's supposed to be, but it is there. But could someone have changed that since this
So
thread?
does deja vu link into this theory then?
Possibly. It doesn't come up in this. This seems to focus more about things just don't feel the same. Since 2012, there's a feeling that the world hasn't felt right and things aren't what we remembered them to be, rather than we've lived this or we've
Yeah,
seen
yeah.
this before. And here we go. When I was then going into Mandela effect, you know, they call it, this article I was saying, they call it false memories. there's an example of a 2010 study from a clock in Bologna in Italy.
So in 1980 in Bologna at the train station, there was a terrible bombing that happened. And there was this survey asking people about the clock there in 2010.
And 92% of respondents falsely remembered that the clock had remained stopped since the bombing, when in fact the clock was repaired shortly after the attack. There's so many aspects of this. Now that is rather than a spelling thing or an issue. That's people actually remembering that or thinking that they saw that clock working when it had that it had stopped when it was always working. And again, at this point, how often do you look at a clock on a station? You've got a phone
Yeah,
or a
and I
watch,
guess
right?
the thing is as well, I guess it's a traumatic experience, and that kind of, that kind of plays into it, and people's memories are kind of a little bit jolted as a result of that as well. But yeah, I can see what you mean. I mean, it is just a strange phenomenon in and of itself, obviously, in the fact that so many people are reporting exactly the same incorrect information.
Yeah, and and on this, someone saying again, I don't know if it's still true. I mean, I went to the Statue of Liberty a few years ago, and I didn't actually go onto the island and went round it. Apparently, you can't go up into the torch, but there are people saying that there's like pictures on Twitter and TripAdvisor of people saying I've just been from the torch and it's fantastic. And he's saying, are these time travelers, or again, are they in a different universe? I mean, a lot of this you can look at it and say, right, well, these are doctored pictures, or these aren't right. But again, it was the idea of it that got me. Now he's saying that there was a viral thread on a forum where someone who claimed to be one of the 23 scientists at CERN claimed that they did create the Mandela effect, and it was this scientist who said the planet was destroyed and put in a simulated world. So again, I just think it's fascinating because a lot of our science fiction now does focus on the multiverse,
Yeah,
like DC, Marvel. As a kid, I remember as a child thinking there's probably a different universe where instead of doing this decision, I did that decision. What has that version of me got up to since
In an
then?
alternate universe, I was the one that founded Tesla.
Yeah. In that scientifically accurate time travel film, I don't know if you've seen it, The Hot Tub Time Machine, where he goes back and creates
See,
Google
now
and
it's
calls it
weird.
Google.
Yeah, it's weird you said that though, because I actually thought that was a documentary.
Yeah, but the one thing actually I did want to mention about this, so like I said, it is just a thread. I didn't see much in the way of other articles, but I love the idea again that the conspiracy here is that something has dramatically altered our living, and it's being covered up, and that we're just living out. I mean, I had an album I had years ago from Orbital. It always sticks out. The image in their artwork on the album, it was a picture of God wearing a virtual reality headset, which I loved because it's kind
Yeah,
of that. It's a similar idea that we are just a simulation. Something, and we're not going to get into it now, so we'll probably pick it up in another episode, or people have a look. I think you'd be really interested in this. They're saying that there was in a place in America called Montauk, and it's supposedly based on, Stranger Things is kind of taken a bit from it, and the Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind film has been based on these events. But in this place, they were doing, I think the military or the government were doing time travel experiments, but they were saying they were never able to travel past 2012 because they couldn't see a future beyond 2012, which for me, that has really got me interested. So I kind of want to follow this up. So if you look on Wikipedia, it'll be the Montauk Project, so MONTAUK. It's a conspiracy that alleges there were a series of secret United States government projects conducted at this Air Force station for the purpose of developing psychological warfare techniques and exotic research, including time travel. But supposedly, they couldn't get past 2012. Now, there is a theory that they're saying that we've reached the end of time or the end of history. So by that they're saying that it doesn't mean that the world has stopped, but humanity has reached the end of its social cultural evolution. Basically, that we as humans are stagnating rather than progressing.
So this is the beginning of the downfall, basically, is what we're saying.
Yeah, so it just feels like a brilliant hot pot of different theories, which again is why I found it. So whilst it's probably, I mean, I think it is a conspiracy theory of a sort, but I love this idea because, yeah, it involves a massive scientific base. It involves a black hole. It involves the Earth being consumed by it. Either we've ended and we're playing out in a simulation, or we've been moved into a parallel universe. You've got the Mandela effect, which happens shortly after it, which is great timing if it's all coincidental. And plus, you've got this Montauk experiment with time travel. So
You know, you know what? That kind of reminds me a bit of what Elon Musk has kind of been preaching as of late. Because I mean, he's had a theory about like the world kind of being like a simulation almost, and that's kind of really where this kind of seems to lead for me.
and I think, look at films like The Matrix. So what was that now? 20 odd years ago. That was a similar theme, right? That we are just in humans exist, but we are in a fake world. And again, for what purpose? I guess would be the key. For me, whenever I hear a conspiracy theory, for me, the first question that I have to answer in my head, or I want answered, is why is the conspiracy? Why do you
Yeah,
think it's a
yeah.
conspiracy? What is the reason for it?
So with this one as well, sorry, are we saying it's being covered up by like governments, or are we saying that it's just something that has happened and we just don't know it, or is it something that's being covered up?
I think it's going to be a bit of both, because what this person has said in the thread is that, yeah, there was a scientist on a forum saying, yeah, that they claimed that they created the Mandela effect and that the planet was destroyed and we were placed in a simulated world.
Well,
What they said was that whoever this person was described reality as being like a set of Russian dolls. Well, there are worlds nestled
right,
within
okay,
another one.
okay.
So simulations within simulations, and it's just, and you said it yourself. It's mentioned there. The Mayans predicted the world would end in 2012.
This would be a great plot line for a film.
Well, yeah, and I think another scientist or another philosopher or whoever he was thought that it wouldn't necessarily be the end of the world, but predicted there would be a reality rearranging event, which is what this would fall into. Again, I think it's just fascinating what has come out of
Well, the thing is,
this.
as well, I guess where you say it's kind of ultimately like that's why the Mandela effect in. Similarly to like what I said about deja vu, I guess that's also maybe how you would explain, when you have a gut feeling, you're like, no, I'm going with my gut. And you're like, oh, I
Yeah,
got that right. But I had a gut feeling about it. And all of a sudden, like, is that ultimately a decision that's being manipulated through like cross interdimensional channels?
yeah. I mean, I just think with the certain things, it's like to me, what makes people love a conspiracy theory now. I think it's a fact. I think it's one of two things. Either there is a belief that something genuinely is being covered and the people are being deceived, or I think sometimes people always want more. What's the word? I don't want to say excitement isn't the right word, but I think people always want to believe there's more to what they're seeing in
Yeah.
life than there really is. So everything has to have a bigger ulterior motive.
And that also is kind of having more information. It's like I am more informed because I have information that other people don't have. Because conspiracy theories, that's what it is. It's an exchange of information, irrespective of how legitimate you think it is, that gives people that sense of I am better knowing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, this one, it all hinges on the fact that it says, I found an article that does reference this one. They said the thread makes claim to the fact the world has got more chaotic, that time moves quicker now. The thing is, yeah, has the world got chaotic? Absolutely. We just have to look at the last 18 months to see everything that's going on. The world has always there's been chaos throughout time. I mean, there's been wars, there's been natural disasters. I mean, the dinosaurs, they didn't have a great time towards the end of it.
It's definitely a rough time in my book.
Yeah. So that's what I mean. But is it just now that we're going through it now, and is it the fact that we live in a society now where on my phone, on Twitter, I can see everything that's happening around the world condensed into a little screen. You can know about anything and everything that's happening as long as it's being reported. Whereas before, you had to read it in the paper or, in our four channels on TV. If it was on the news, you found out about it. But now we've got so much out of it. Does the world feel more chaotic because life is more chaotic? Because, we are we're just being bombarded by information left, right, and centre.
Yeah, because it's ease of access as well, isn't it? I mean, even compared to 2012, like the rise of like social media networks, like even since then, like I know Twitter was a big thing back then, but nowadays, like everyone and their dog has a Twitter account.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
you've just got so much access to so much. Yeah, that's probably the reasonable explanation for that. To be
And
fair.
things change. We've now got air travel. We've got more cars who do this. There's more and more stuff that's happening in the world. You know, it's it does feel like we're in a crazy time. I wouldn't necessarily say is it crazier because we've got more advances and we've got more things in our life that can cause things to have issues. You know, computers. I mean, you know, the Y2K, which didn't happen.
Y2K scare, my God.
I think what attracted me to this one is that it was almost like trying to justify why life is shit, or why life is. I think why life is shit, or why life is it just doesn't feel great. And yeah, the thing about the Mandela effect that's always got me, and like I said, I've never really looked into it. It's just always fascinated me as a concept. Is if it was one or two people, but it's the fact that it's a general belief. Now, again, I always pretty much argue with myself. I love arguing with myself. Is it that I think kind of like you said, you remember things differently. So if you see a group of people talking about something that you've got a vague recollection of, would you fall into what they're saying because you can't exactly remember it, and you see it like them and
Yeah.
say, "Oh yeah, God, yeah, I thought it was that as well," because you don't 100% know which way that bloody Apple logo's facing or which side the chunk's taken out of it. You'll
Yeah,
along with
yeah, you kind of just buy into somebody else's reality at that
yeah.
point.
Does Mr. Monopoly have a bloody monocle or not?
You know what? You know what? We're gonna have a look. We'll settle it now as well because I actually don't know the answer to that question because I still don't know.
I'm going to say he doesn't, but I think he did.
Right, Mr. Monopoly. I think he. I would just take the assumption that he does because it's the Monopoly man.
He's rich, and that's
Yeah, because he's rich. And why would you not? Well, if I was rich, I'd wear a monocle. No, apparently Mr. Monopoly doesn't have a monocle. That's actually sorely disappointing. I feel like, do you know what Monopoly should do? The company that make it, I don't know who makes it. They should just release a couple of edited boxes where he's got a monocle. Just 1 in 1,000. They put a monocle on him
no,
and
but
see the world go mad.
no, but that's proved it though, hasn't it? Because I've said to you, I don't think he does, but I do remember him wearing it. Now I think there is an American. It's for a food item, peanut, but it's American and we don't have it, so I don't know. But I think he is a character that looks similar and has got a monocle. So I'm wondering, does it get do we get mixed up? Let's see what Google throws up. If I do peanut logo monocle, but you see what I'm saying? Could we be mixing things up?
Yeah, this is the thing, because again, do you know what it was? Is even when you talked about the Apple logo, I've got a Mac sat on the desk, and I had to have a look at it to make sure that I knew what the logo was.
Yeah, actually,
So I was just like, hang on a minute.
yeah, there we go. He's called Mr. Peanut, and he's got a top hat and he's got a monocle. So you know, could it be that? It's a fairly similar looking logo.
Yeah, that's probably true as well. It's a bit like when people, I think that like a lot of the American logos are good for it with like Target. They're like how many red rings are in like the Target logo.
Yeah, yeah.
And a lot of people get that wrong as well. So maybe it is you've just got a familiarity with a particular thing, and that's what it is. But I agree with what you said. You know, when you overhear something or you hear someone say something, and because your memory of what it is isn't good, you believe into that, you buy into their reality, and you just take it. And so that's probably where that effect actually comes from.
Right. So yeah. So that's a nice one to end on. That the world has potentially ended.
You know, we started and said, "Oh, I think I'm dark here," and you've just gone, "We're actually, it's all fake. We're all a simulation. I'm a glitch."
When you said that, I was mentally thinking, yeah, hold my beer.
Yeah. I was just like, well, damn, I talked about the Titanic, but you went for all 8 billion people, all died. We're now a
I'll
simulation.
see your disaster, and I'll raise you a global the world ending. Was there are there any others that you wanted to mention? I mean, we can only sort of briefly mention. We might come back. We might do a part 2 at some point.
Yeah, do you know what? I think maybe we should do a part 2 with this one, but
Okay,
what we'll
yeah.
do is we'll come back with just some really entertaining ones as opposed to like any dead serious ones. We'll come back with some like ludicrous, like funny conspiracy theories, I think, and we'll do a part 2 for that.
Yeah, and if anyone, if anyone's listening, if you are listening and you've got something you'd like to discuss, or there's a conspiracy theory you like or want us to potentially pick up in part 2, yeah, message us.
Yeah, pop us a comment, DM, Twitter, Facebook, electronic mail if you still do that. That's very 90s.
But depending on when I get this out, who knows? It might be holographic, imageries.
But yeah, what we'll do is we'll call it there. We might, like I said, we'll do a part 2 and we'll do some entertaining stuff. But yeah, I've been Lou and you've been
Dan.
And this has been Casting Views.
See you later.
Bye.